Tomato sauce makes everything Italian.
Victoria.
Because of the injunctions.
Yeah.
But the schools are down. We have people in 19 schools in Vancouver. They're picketing.
I don't.
Another 25 across the province.
Let me tell.
I don't know at this moment whether I am past the board.
I thought we were getting to something when Larry and I were meeting on the weekend.
CCGM Electronics, 1285 Marine Drive, North Vancouver.
BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. The strike situation in British Columbia has turned critical this morning. Schools throughout the province are picketed one way or another. If they are prevented from picketing by injunctions in Vancouver, Victoria, and I believe Cranbrook, the schools are still being picketed by the CUPE employees, by some Vancouver municipal and regional employees, and in many places by the teachers themselves. Now let me try and give you a little add up from what I call, first of all, let me show you what's happening on a couple of the picket lines in Vancouver this morning. And first we go to Vancouver Tech, where the teachers are not allowed to picket because of the injunction, but the picketing is being done by the Vancouver City Civic Union, VMREU, for instance. That's a CUPE picket. They're apparently out on a total political protest against the law, some say, with the law, say others. Now we go to Burnaby South this morning, shortly after daybreak, and the teachers there are picketing at Burnaby South.
Something that's really new for teachers, but an awful lot of them are supporting it.
Yeah, it is new for teachers,
yeah,
isn't it? I mean,
it's a first.
Has it been a hard step?
It's a first for certainly for BC teachers, and yeah, it has been a hard step, I think, for a lot of people. But I think it's a matter of we've been pushed around for years, and you know, if we don't stand up this time, it's going to get worse.
What grade are you in, first of all?
12.
12. You gonna go to school today?
12, yeah, for sure.
You're gonna go?
Yeah, you betcha.
Yeah.
We might see see who's there.
These exams, and you can't afford to miss school.
What have they got planned for you, though, with most of the teachers out, it seems?
Nothing really, just help.
If you need help, they'll help you with what you need.
Being in grade 12, this is an important year for you.
Yeah,
so what do you feel about this?
Kind of screws us up because we've got exams at the end of November, and if we don't get the stuff, they still test us on it.
Yeah.
So
Establishments like SFU, where the faculty are going to withdraw for 5 days, some members of the Faculty Association, UBC with spotty trouble, some of the colleges with spotty trouble, and of course the fact that 14,000 CUPE members in every educational establishment in which they are certified in British Columbia are out on their political protest strike. So what does that give us this morning? It gives us 40,000 BCGEU still out on strike. 14,000 CUPE out on strike. Teachers picketing throughout the province, a number which could be as high between $25,000 and $30,000. Now, how did this come about? Let's just summarize for a moment what happened at the Labour Board in Vancouver yesterday, which was, to say the least, a bit of a three-ring circus. The BCGEU were negotiating an exemption from Bill 3 to give them seniority rights and carrying on, hopefully, to conclude their master agreement. And that caused a bit of trouble, as you'll see later on. Also on the ground floor, Albertini of the Labour Board was considering, has not yet given his decision on whether or not the colleges can or cannot be picketed. Up on the top floor were the heavies of the Labour movement, Kube and Jack Monroe and Larry Kuehn of the BC Teachers Federation. They had been very close. In fact, they had an agreement in principle for exemption for one school district, North Vancouver. But the government, in the shape of Deputy Minister Jim Carter, intervened, and that put a paid to that. Understand the situation yesterday, because your economy and your bread and your everything else depends on it. Had the BCGEU reached its exemption yesterday, and they were close to it, both sides, I think, would admit, and had the teachers got their exemption from Bill 3 to give them seniority provisions, today's strike would only have been the BCGEU. Well, then, the teachers can't get an agreement. Kube is in the picture heavily for Operation Solidarity. Out go the teachers today, and out comes the CUPE, Canadian Union of Public Employees, all 14,000, who are striking, they say, as a political protest, which, of course, many people say is against the law. Some say it's not. What I'm going to do first this morning, the people you're going to meet on the program this morning are these key figures in this crisis in BC. Art Kube, BC Federation of Labour and Solidarity. Cliff Andstein. Have I got Andstein? Yeah. Andstein, who is, of course, the BCGEU. Jim Matkin, key figure in this, the Employers' Council of British Columbia. Larry Kuehn of the BC Teachers Federation. First, we're going to my summary on film of the drama yesterday at the Labour Board in British Columbia after the break. There were more reporters at the Labour Board and cameras yesterday than covered the Korean War. Dramatically at 6 o'clock, Art Kube was the first one to come in, and here's a summary of what Art Kube, a short segment of what Art Kube told us yesterday as he gave us the bad news that everything had fallen apart.
As you know, going out on the second wave will raise a number of other issues which are important to other groups, such as Bill 6, such as Bill 27, and many other things. I want to let the people know that we did everything in our power to bring about a resolution. The government knew the deadlines. There's no way I think we can stop it now.
We'll question Mr. Kube more, but first of all, I now want you to see part of the statement made by the Deputy Minister in the Premier's office, Norman Spector, who has been the key man on the government side of the negotiations, and some of what he said.
During the course of the past several days, it has become apparent to us that there is in fact a hidden agenda on the part of the union negotiators, namely to use the prospect of a teacher's strike and general chaos to wring contract concessions out of the government independent of the area of Bill 3. Included in these contract concessions are demands for a 5% salary increase, as well as other benefit increases in a year when other groups in both the public and the private sector are settling, as you know, at much lower levels.
This was the BCGEU.
Were you demanding to tell us that this blackout is off?
I have requested of the mediator that the news blackout be lifted.
And have negotiations ceased?
No, negotiations will continue. Our intent is to attempt to negotiate layoff language to allow exemption from Bill 3. But what has become apparent, we have been faced with demands that the entire contract must be negotiated and resolved by tomorrow morning. My point of reference was the demand that was transmitted to us, both directly and through the mediator, that what was required to have a settlement here was a settlement of the entire contract and not just the question of layoff and recall language that would allow exemption from Bill 3.
Surely,
That is my reference to ringing concessions.
surely, Mr. Spector, you didn't expect the union to go back to work without having the contract settled.
I think my remarks are with reference to what it would take to gain a settlement that would prevent a general strike.
Obviously, you've not gotten that settlement. Do you think you're going to get a general strike?
I have no way to know
How
that.
does it look to you at this point?
I have no way to assess that.
Will the government go ahead and fire the reprimanding cleaners tomorrow morning?
I don't know what the government's plans are.
Do you know what the plans are regarding the 1,600 people who are about to be fired?
No, I don't.
So that could still be on hold.
We don't know, and I suppose Cabinet will be addressing the issue of the layoffs of the 1,600 people.
Do you plan to report back to Mr. Bennett, or have you done so already?
I will report back to Mr. Bennett. I have been talking to him periodically through the negotiations, explaining the situation.
Could you spell out, please, just for clarity, what you mean by during the course of the negotiations it became apparent that there is a hidden agenda on the board? By that, do you mean the negotiating the entire contract language? Is that the hidden agenda, or is it demand for repeal of Bennett's total package?
No, I don't think we've been confronted with that latter demand. We've been, the entire contract.
They wanted to continue through the whole contract negotiations after an exemption. That's the hidden agenda.
That's right.
That wasn't on the table during the negotiations, as far as you're concerned.
That wasn't on the table when we proceeded here. We agreed to extend the negotiations, but we were then presented with a demand that be concluded in short order.
How close were you to completing the exemption language? Quite close.
I think fairly close. I think the number of issues were finite.
What kind of package did you offer them at seniority in the exemption?
Well, we were talking about concept of service-wide seniority. We had provisions for placement of employees who were affected by layoff. We believe that we had a model that was fair and equitable and patterned after major private and public sector agreements in this province.
Well, let me ask a perfectly simple question. Do you feel that you were blackjacked or double-crossed by the BCGEU in negotiations?
We feel that the terms and conditions of reaching a settlement have been a moving target since the beginning. And that it has been like nailing jelly to a tree.
Nailing jelly to a tree. Upstairs, meanwhile, Larry Kuehn of the teachers had come to his dead end because the agreement in North Vancouver had been vetoed, we're told, by Deputy Minister Jim Carter. Now here's what some of what Kuehn said to that same press conference.
We had a group that negotiated all night long in North Vancouver. We thought that the package was coming together, and the Deputy Minister intervened this afternoon to tell the school board not to ratify that agreement. The teachers in North Vancouver ratified the agreement this afternoon, but it's our understanding that the board has not done that because of the intervention of the Deputy. It makes very clear to us that, in fact, our employers are not free to enter into agreements without the intervention of the government, without the direction of the government. And the government is not prepared to grant to teachers the protection from Bill 3 that they have claimed is open for negotiation.
That was all predictable at that particular time. But the shock came when the divisional president of CUPE, Owen Dykstra, came forward. He's got 25,000 members, 11,000 in cities and municipalities, 14,000 in educational institutes. 14,000 are out today. Here's Dykstra.
This is a political protest against the repressive laws being imposed on them by our provincial government. Our members are fully aware of the risks and hardships involved, but we are convinced that the alternative, that of losing our rights as workers and our dignity as citizens, is even more frightening. The Social Credit government was given every opportunity during the recent attempts to resolve this situation to prevent this confrontation. But the government decided to act in bad faith. This political protest will continue until the Bennett government gives BC's public sector workers a solid assurance of fair and just treatment in accordance with the terms of our collective agreements.
Now you're going to hear part of Cliff Andstein's reaction at the press conference last night to the statements by Norman Spector that the rules of the game had been changed in the middle. I said double-crossed, he didn't quite agree. Here's Andstein.
Because we had made it very clear from the beginning that we were here to negotiate not only the layoff and recall language rising out of the Bill 3 issue, but also our collective agreement. And the discussion took place about the references to both Bill 2 and Bill 3, our collective agreement negotiations, and the firings of our members made in the Premier's speech. As we went through the week, we continually reiterated that position. We started to make very slow progress on the Bill 3 issue and the layoff issue until 23 hours before the strike deadline expired, at which point the government put on the table its first comprehensive proposal in 8 days. Subsequently, we again discussed the question of collective agreement negotiations in this room, particularly after on a very popular morning TV show, the provincial secretary, who is the minister responsible for these negotiations, said that come Thursday, if there was no agreement on the Bill 3 issue, he would seek to expand bargaining to the entire collective agreement. That was quoted in the daily press, it was reported on the media, it's down on tape. We agreed, we issued a statement, we welcomed that initiative, we again asked the government for their proposals. They returned to work, or to Victoria, after requesting an adjournment over the weekend, contrary to Mr. Chabot's comments on the picket line. The government requested that adjournment to go to Victoria to prepare their contract demands for amendments to our collective agreement. And we have been waiting since last week to have those demands tabled today. So to say that it comes as a surprise to Mr. Spector means that either he missed a lot of that was happening at the bargaining table, or, as I suspect, he's deliberately trying to distort events. I would categorically deny having ever implied or stated that if there is no settlement to our collective agreement, there will be a general strike.
What were your money demands in the
Our money demand was for a cost of living increase. It was our opening demand. The employer's opening proposal, as somebody in our caucus says, the first time they've ever put a figure on the table in the opening round was for 0%.
But that was yesterday. What happens today? We might get a good idea from the guests in the studio. I've got to start with Andstein first, because he's got to go back to negotiations or something after the break. As of this morning, it is no exaggeration to say that those who support the social credit actions and their big package of bills, human rights, rentalsmen, Bill 3, Bill 2, all the rest of it, regard the man I'm now going to talk to, Art Kube, BC Federation of Labour and Solidarity, as an ogre, a man who is determined to use the clout of the trade unions to destroy the power of the government in its legislative programme. You would accept that assessment of your political enemies who are legion in BC at this moment, would you not, Mr. Kube?
Well, I think that's their opinion.
That's their opinion. Do you not accept the fact that you are going to use, if you have to, the total clout of 180,000 public sector employees to make the government withdraw some of its legislative plan, or else?
I think that a number of other issues are entering into the fray now. Till yesterday, we could have resolved that thing solely on a question of due process, you know. But as more people go out, they do have other demands and other things which are of great concern to them, and it becomes always harder and harder to resolve.
But will they go out on your leadership and your command? According to the schedule that Solidarity and the BC Fed have been talking about now for these many weeks. For instance, education workers are off the job today, right?
That's right.
Will the Crown Corporation strike on the 10th?
That is the plan.
Will the civic and transportation workers, garbage collection, strike on the 14th?
That's the plan.
Will the hospital employees walk out on the 18th?
That's the plan.
That'll be... When will the ferries go out?
Look, what we want to do is resolve the particular question. From day one, I have tried extremely hard to make it as easy as possible for the government to bring peace to this province. And the government has just stonewalled every issue. I thought that yesterday we had an agreement, but what does the government do? It gets a deputy minister to repeat the agreement with the teachers. The government tables all kinds of other issues other than dealing with Bill 3 on a bargain table. Look, the BCGEU had agreed that if they could resolve the question of Bill 3, they wouldn't have asked anyone to go out.
If they could have resolved the whole contract under Bill 3.
No, that's not true.
If they could have resolved the exemption only under Bill 3.
That's right.
In other words, if they resolved the exemption under Bill 3 yesterday for the BCGEU, and if the government, I'm paraphrasing your words, had not interfered in North Vancouver, you say only the BCGEU would be out today.
That's right.
But as of this morning, with 14,000 CUPE workers out on what seems to be a strike against the law, are you now committed to bringing out every public sector employee in a general strike?
Look, I still want to work out a settlement. I mean, anyone who's gone mad would take that proposition. I want to work a settlement. I desperately tried in the last 72 hours to reach a settlement. I will continue trying.
But your schedule stays.
That's right.
So therefore the government must bend to your will on Bill...
Look, it's not a question of bending to my will. It's a question of providing due process to people who have enjoyed it for years and years. Surely what we're asking for is not an outlandish, we're not asking for sums of money, additional benefits. We're just asking that due process be maintained in this province, something workers have fought and died for 100 years ago. I'm not going to get the government to remove that.
You are going to get the government to remove that?
I'm not going to allow the government to remove due process from working people in this province.
Is the strike of the CUPE workers not a strike against due process?
That's right. It's a political protest to maintain due process.
Leave that for a moment. Jimmy Matkin will be on later, but I want to get to Cliff Andstein. You were accused, and you categorically deny that you had used any hidden agenda to bring the Spector and company to their knees and meet your contract demands. But you were after a total contract, were you not?
That's right, Chuck.
When did that come on the table? Did you not start negotiating only for the exemption, in other words, seniority provisions and termination and layoff and recall language? Is that not how you started?
The proposal, the concept, as Mr. Spector likes to say, that we also had to negotiate our collective agreement to resolve our own dispute was put on the table the same day that the Premier sent him to Vancouver and he came flying into the Labor Relations Board. He has known for 2 weeks, 2 solid weeks, that at some point in time we had to get to the BCGEU collective agreement. The reason is our members at that time, this is before the strike, had said, we've got to resolve a number of the outstanding issues. Once the strike started over a week ago, we made it even clearer to Spector, to other government people, to the chairman of the Labor Relations Board, and to other unions. And it was in the press, so that everybody would understand that we were receiving messages from our members that said, once we get that layoff thing settled, make sure that you get the rest of the collective agreement settled before we go back to work. We're not going to go through and play the same games over our hours of work, the attempts to strip us of our collective bargaining rights that we went through last year.
But to meet their demands for your agreement, you've got to go to the terms of, quote, Bill 2, have you not?
That's not what anybody has ever said. Chabot has never said that. Government negotiators have never said that. What they've said is they want to negotiate some of the issues that were addressed in Bill 2. I mean, the only reason Bill 2 is on the table is because they didn't like the settlement that Spector and Larry Bell negotiated for them last year, when the Premier sent them in to settle the strike.
Spector said, we have been faced with demands that the entire contract must be negotiated and resolved by this morning, which is what day is it, Wednesday. Was that your clear understanding? Had to be resolved by this morning?
I've never said it. Spector's not telling the truth. And in fact, what he's done, I mean, one of the problems we've got, Jack, is I'm trying to negotiate an agreement with a person who's not a professional negotiator.
You mean?
With Norman Spector. I'm trying to negotiate a collective agreement to settle a strike, to settle a dispute involving 40,000 people. He is in there to settle the strike for the political agenda of the Premier and the people that he works for. That means what happens is that when a mediator is working between us, the mediator tries to put pressure on both parties to settle an agreement. He may say things, he may use things. Those are up to the mediator. One thing that never happens in labor relations, one thing that you never do is that you go to the media and start telling the media the reporters what a mediator has said to you in confidence. It's such a fundamental breach of any professional negotiating ethics for Norman Spector to have gone to a Vancouver Sun reporter last night and said, Vince Reddy, the mediator, told me this. I mean, it destroys any bargaining relationship.
Just let me get that right. Vince Reddy, the mediator, told him what?
Norman Spector went to Vancouver Sun reporter last night at the Labor Relations Board and said, it was not Andstein that told me anything about an 8 a.m. deadline. It was Vince Reddy, the mediator. Now, Reddy did not do that.
You went to Reddy?
I never went to Reddy. I never said anything like that.
Did you go after that to Reddy?
I went after that to Reddy, and I understand what happened. It's obvious Spector didn't understand what happened. He misinterpreted, either deliberately or because he wasn't paying attention.
Okay.
But that's one of the reasons why you don't betray those types of confidence.
Are you still willing to negotiate with Spector at the table?
I was negotiating with Spector at the table
at
midnight last night.
You said he didn't tell the truth. Are you willing now to negotiate
yes,
with
Spector?
Yes,
we're going back in at 1 o'clock today. We were there last night. We were there till 4 o'clock this morning, and we're going to go back in.
If the teachers had got their exemption last night, which we'll talk about later, you would be the only union on strike today. Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know about that because...
what does Hart say to that?
Well, just a minute. Let me finish. You said if the teachers had got their exemption alone, that would have still left our exemption. There's a mutual support pact here.
But you would have been on strike alone if the teachers had got their exemption.
No.
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 No, no. The agreement was that everyone would get their exemptions on Bill 3.
Everyone. In the public sector.
Us and the teachers. We had those. We've been working for days. The Teachers Federation had an agreement. I've been at the Labor Relations Board for 16 days now, 12, 18, 20 hours a day to get a settlement.
How close were you on your exemption? That much?
Well, how close?
Quite close.
We were, in one area, we're working on what I call converging paths. In another area, we're sort of still apart. It was possible to have gotten that settlement if the government had agreed.
Couple of basic facts from you, Cliff, because you've got to go. One, are you picketing Vancouver schools today?
We have members in 19 schools who work there. It's their full-time workplace. They are picketing those schools. That is their legal workplace. Those are legal picket lines.
And not even that yesterday's injunction prevents you from picketing there. That was against the teachers.
I think all yesterday's injunction shows is what side the judiciary is really on when it comes to the rights of working people.
You don't think you're going to get a fair crack from the courts?
I don't think workers have ever got one.
Now, so therefore you've got 19...
I want to clear up something on this money thing that Spector... Right. I mean, when he said he was asking...
He said you wanted 5%.
When he said he was asking the mediator to lift that press blackout, that's when he was doing it right there. After he lost his cool, after listening to Art and Larry Kuehn, he lost his cool. He jumped in. He and I were supposed to be in a meeting at 5:30 exchanging more contract language. He lost his cool, jumped into the chair in front of the reporters, he broke the confidence of the press blackout. Then he asks the mediator to do it. All we've done is to put our initial opening position on the table. We got phone calls last night from our members, some who've said, we don't care about the money. We want to settle these other issues. Others said, well, we're glad you put some money on the table because we think the government should talk about it since they screwed us for the last 4 years.
Okay, next question now. The firings come layoffs, layoffs come firings, are still as far as you know in the air. Only the government can answer that question.
You can't fire people who are on strike in this province.
On a legal strike?
On a legal strike. I mean, they can't take their paychecks away. They're on $75 a week strike pay. They can't take their work away, send them home because they're on strike. And Chabot himself has said, once we reach settlement on this layoff and recall language, most, if not all of those people will be able to exercise their seniority rights. So this stuff, all this stuff that they're doing...
How long are you going to be out?
How long are we going out? Until we get a settlement, until the teachers get a settlement. And if the government deliberately continues to drag its feet, to escalate, if it does the same thing it's done over the weekend...
And are you now pleased this morning that 14,000 CUPE members are striking against the law to support you and the teachers?
I'm not pleased that they had to go out. I'm not pleased that the government is responsible, has deliberately provoked today's response by canceling those agreements. But, yeah, I'm glad we have that support because they're supporting us, and we're going to stay out and support them until they get what they want.
So you've got to face the man whom you said did not tell the truth today at 1 o'clock.
That's right.
Next, my schedule for this morning is I'm going to speak to Jim Matkin of the Employers' Council by himself, Larry Kuehn by himself, and bring in Art Kube with Larry Kuehn, just to get the broad picture. I'd love to have the Premier or a major cabinet minister here this morning, but that's impossible, it would seem. They don't want to talk in public until they've got their plan of action lined out. After the break, it'll be Jim Matkin of the Employers' Council. Jim Matkin is Executive Director of the Employers Council of British Columbia. He was previously a Deputy Minister of Labour in the Government of Victoria under both the NDP and Social Credit. Straightforward, simple question, Mr. Matkin. How do you interpret the actions of the BC Federation of Labour, CUPE, the teachers, as of this morning, with something close to 80,000 people out or nearly out on strike?
I think the perspective of the industry at this point is that we're concerned about this phenomenon, Operation Solidarity. We think that there's probably more confusion than crisis going on right now. I think if you recognize that there is a clarification of the law regarding the teachers, the injunction order made it apparent that they do not have the right to strike, that there is a way for these problems to be resolved lawfully with due process, and that we hope that the government maintains its steadfast approach in favor of restraint and does not back off of the restraint initiative that it has taken, that it keeps the situation in perspective.
How much damage will today's actions do from an employer's point of view to the stability, financial status and investment prospects in British Columbia?
I think if people ignore the law, that will do damage to our economy and to the well-being of this society. I don't think they will ignore the law. I think people will find a way to come back to the bargaining table and resolve these problems. I think it's important to place this whole situation in perspective. How did we get here?
Yeah, I'd like to have your interpretation of how we get here, because I got lots of spokesmen on the other side who'll tell me how we get here. They say they got here because of Bennett's ideological package, his repressive measures, his arbitrary measures, and his dealing with the BCGEU particularly. That's what they say.
From industry's point of view, we got here because the tough economic times demanded some restraint, some government restraint. The government had an election on this issue, and the election made it clear that there was support in the public for restraint, for government, public sector restraint. And that's really the bigger issue. That's the subject that we're dealing with. Now, we have some particular problems with the implementation of that restraint.
In other words, you're telling me that Bennett handled it badly?
I'm not telling you that. I'm saying that Bennett had a mandate from the people. He implemented legislation regarding restraint, and that has been responded to by a phenomenon called Operation Solidarity that I question its motives.
What do you think are its motives? Do you think its motives are to create a general strike and overturn the government?
Well, my concern is, are they trying to make a deal, or are they simply setting artificial deadlines, as they did on October the 31st? Whatever the government does, in that case they did not fire any workers, yet the strike went ahead. They set another deadline last night, 5:30, even though there was progress being made in the negotiations. Whatever the government did, showed flexibility, they still went ahead. So the question I have is, what are the motives of Operation Solidarity? Is it a new political party? Has it become a monster out of control?
Surely that's not your question. Surely your question is, does Operation Solidarity have enough clout to force Bennett to do one of two things? Either to force Bennett to back down, or two, to recall the legislature with back-to-work legislation and call an election.
Is that due process? Is that the way we're going to have this province governed? We have a democracy. That is guerrilla democracy. You blackmail the legislators into changing the law by the actions on the street. We've got an opposition. We have a ballot box. That's the way we make changes in this society, as I understand it.
Do you think the final upshot might have to be an election in British Columbia so that Operation Solidarity, if it loses the election as a lobby or a party, realizes they must obey Bennett's package?
No, I don't, but I think that Operation Solidarity should decide what it is. Is it a political party? Is that what it wants to do? Then it should be running candidates and should be registering as a political party.
Right now, you've got 14,000 CUPE members out on a, quote, political strike. With your undoubted experience and recognized expertise in this, is the CUPE political strike against the law or not against the law under the famous Weiler decision?
Well, that'll have to be decided by the appropriate court.
Opinion?
My opinion is that when workers engage in a sympathy strike to try to encourage another employer to settle terms and conditions of employment. That is not a political strike. That is not exempted by the earlier decisions of the board. That is illegal.
So therefore, your opinion is that CUPE are illegal and could be sued into bankruptcy.
I'm not making a specific judgment, but I think there's a problem. There's been confusion in the province. There are two kinds of strikes going on: sympathy strikes and political strikes. Political strikes under our law at the present time, and there should be an amendment, are not illegal. Sympathy strikes are illegal, and I think it's very important to distinguish the two. If you're going out and strike in support of another union who's trying to gain a collective agreement, that is a sympathy strike and has been illegal since the turn of the century.
And you would expect the government, would you expect the government to take whatever legal action it can, starting today, against those who are not on clearly legal strikes?
I expect that people will obey the law, and if they don't obey the law, then they'll suffer the consequences. That's the due process model that I understand.
Boy, what this does to industrial stability in British Columbia, in your opinion, is what?
Well, I think that every negotiation has to go through a period of confusion and crisis. And let's step back a minute. You know, we're on the verge of settlement with the GEU. We just heard from Mr. Andstein. He's very close. He said
that was finite on the exemption.
On the exemption, but that's the issue that we're wrestling with here. And I am very concerned to see this pillorying of a public servant who can't answer back as a deputy minister. No, Jim Carter.
Oh, Jim Carter.
He's not part of this affair. The key thing is an admission that there is a mutual pact between these various groups, and that's the part of Operation Solidarity that concerns me. One group says we won't settle until the other settles. So this notion that somehow it was all deflected by some action of a deputy minister is wrong. I don't believe that.
Maybe I can get Mr. Carter on the air this morning, but I doubt it very much indeed. Certainly it would be good to have some official government position, but as you say, they must wait until the waters settle a little bit. Is that correct?
I think so. As I say, I think things aren't as bad as perhaps we believe, that there is a chance of settling these disputes at the bargaining table.
Still?
Yes, I really do. I think that...
well, later on I'm going to have you back with Art Kube. But I'll leave Mr. Matkin of the Employers' Council at the moment. Do you think we can get over this hurdle by negotiating involving the teachers and the BCGEU and get CUPE back to work?
I think this Operation Solidarity stayed out of the picture and let the individual unions solve their problems. We could make deals and get an agreement. But when politics gets mixed with industrial relations, all you get is confusion.
My thanks to Jim Matkin. Don't leave the studio, please. Next, Larry Kuehn of the Teachers Federation. Larry Kuehn is president, as if you didn't know, of the BC Teachers Federation. What the devil went wrong yesterday? Oh, you're the guy who's accused of pillorying Jim Carter. Let me set the stage, and you correct me if I'm wrong. One of the three-ring circuses yesterday was negotiations on the top floor of the Labour Relations Board as to whether or not the school boards with the teachers could negotiate exemptions from Bill 3. First question. In negotiating that exemption, were you expressing your concerns about the fact that Bill 3 removes, if it wishes, principals and vice principals from the BCTF?
That wasn't at issue in that particular negotiation.
What was at issue?
What it was at issue was having some sort of a seniority layoff and severance pay clause which would allow us to gain exemption from the arbitrary powers of Bill 3.
And did you have a deadline set for obtaining at least one exemption which might be a model?
Well, as part of the package, there had to be one contract which was approved by PEC as an exemption that could be a model, and a statement from the minister which indicated that that should be the basis on which negotiations took place in other districts so that it could apply to all of our teachers, not just to some.
Who set that deadline?
The deadline was a part of the escalating action plan of Solidarity.
Operation Solidarity.
Yes.
So Solidarity said, okay.
We said that what we were looking for was for everybody in the public sector to have the opportunity to gain those exemptions from Bill 3, so that everybody, not just some groups, but that everybody had that possibility.
How many school boards attempted to achieve exemptions?
Well, we had negotiations in Richmond, that took place on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Those broke down when the government clearly intervened, or somebody intervened anyway. We never got a clear a statement of who it was, but there was a clear intervention from somebody on late Saturday night because the ground rules completely changed in those negotiations. They broke off. So we went out and through our local association in North Vancouver, on Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock, asked them to set up negotiations. They were set up at 8 o'clock Sunday night. They negotiated through the night, had an agreement at 4:30 a.m. That would have served as the basis, 4:30 a.m. Monday morning, as the basis for the part of the package that applied to us.
Stop there. You therefore had this. I've got a copy of the memorandum of agreement between the teachers, the North Van School Board, and you.
No,
right?
that was an agreement between the North Van School Board and the North Van Teachers Association. It was signed by both parties after the 4:30 a.m. agreement.
In that was an agreeable definition of seniority and layoff, right?
That's right. That's right.
Now, why did that not take effect?
It didn't take effect because it was to go to the teachers and the school board on Monday afternoon for ratification. It went to the teachers for ratification. They ratified that and an agreement to accept no pay increase for the next year as part of a package. It went to the North Vancouver School Board that afternoon. They were prepared to ratify it, and I understand that a phone call came from Mr. Carter, and that's been confirmed by somebody on their board as well.
Jim Carter, the Deputy Minister of Education.
That's right, and he told them not to ratify it.
So are you suggesting that the government, Heinrich, through his deputy, directly intervened and said, don't sign this seniority package?
That is what we've been told, both by our local association president who talked to Carter, and one of your researchers has confirmed with a member of the school board.
Now, if you were still to get the seniority agreement, would that put you back to work?
That is...
Approved by the minister for all districts.
That is not sufficient at this point, that there has to be the same opportunity for every public sector worker. We are not in a position where teachers are going to get some special deal that leaves all the other public sector workers out in the cold, that they can't get exemptions. If the BCGEU can get an exemption, if we can get an exemption, and if that's open to everyone else in the public sector, then that part of the problem is dealt with. But but as we have said all along, that once we are out, there are other issues that are important to teachers, specifically the massive cutbacks in the education system that this government has already started and has plans for over the next 3 years. And that's really what has gotten teachers so upset and angry and has them out on the picket lines. And that has to be on the table now. Before the strike started, we were prepared to resolve it with that and work through political action and other methods of to try to deal with the other problems.
Are you telling me, Larry Keaton, that as of this minute, you don't know how many teachers have crossed picket lines yet?
I have no information yet this morning. I've been in here with you.
Good, but they may not all have crossed picket lines.
I'm sure that they haven't. The reports we had were that teachers are solid today.
You're telling me now that your position, backed by solidarity, is not only do you want this agreement for North Van, you want it for every school district in the province, and you want it for every public sector trade union which does not have satisfactory termination of layoff provisions as required by PEC.
What we want is a framework that allows every public sector employee to get that exemption from the arbitrary powers of Bill 3.
Do you also wish the government to back down on its financial cutbacks on education?
Yes.
Is that not being totally unrealistic?
It isn't being totally unrealistic. What the government is doing is destroying the education system in this province. The massive cutbacks, the increases in class size, the destruction of services to children that is going to take place if the plan that the government has announced goes ahead is simply cannot be allowed to stand. Teachers can't just sit by and let that happen.
You're saying teachers, therefore, through the Teachers Federation, must have control of the financial apparatus for education in the province?
Not saying control. There has to be some process by which there is some negotiation, so it isn't a unilateral decision that is made totally independent of the needs of children, which is the case right now.
Surely the government, whether one likes their philosophy or their money interpretations or not, is supreme in its power to decide where a dollar will be spent, and that the only place you can change their minds is at the polling booth.
Well, we think that there has to be some process of negotiation, as there is for everyone else. When you're talking about these elements of service to children, you're also talking about working conditions of teachers. Every other teacher across this country has the right to negotiate their working conditions. Every other employee in this province has the right to negotiate their working conditions. We are the only employees who are excluded from that right. That's what is at issue when we're talking about the level of service. It's a combination of working conditions and level of service, and everyone else has that right to negotiate those things.
You're not a union. You never could make up your mind whether you were a union or not, could you?
We are not covered under the labor code of this province.
But you have an employment contract under Bill 3. Which you're covered in Bill 3. Is the teachers' union now the spearhead of solidarity to bring this government to its knees?
That our objective isn't to bring the government to its knees, it's to reach an agreement that accommodates the needs of people in this province. Not that anybody is going to get everything they want by any means, but there has to be an accommodation which allows the people of this province to live together in some kind of harmony over the next period of time. And what we've seen ever since July the 7th is pushing by the government on things that are just creating divisions in this society.
Do you expect Bennett to back down on his budget, on his financial preparations, on his cutbacks? I know he pulled $40 million out of the woodwork last year before the election. I know all that. But do you seriously expect a government with a majority to back down and meet that list of demands, which has gone from a mere exemption to give the money back to the education system?
That is what our demand is.
And you'll stay out that long?
There has to be an accommodation. There has to be some kind of an agreement on that.
Tough, isn't it?
Yes.
Any strike pay for teachers?
There is no strike pay for teachers. We aren't, we haven't, it's totally out of our tradition. We haven't built up a massive strike fund. We don't have, funds to pay our members for strike pay. And teachers are out there because they are committed to education.
One thing, though. Teachers who want to cross the picket line, are you going to use any heavy tactics like switching teachers from school to school so they don't know their colleagues really, to keep those willing to work out of the schools?
The questions of picketing are made by local strike committees in each local association. It's my understanding that that local strike committees have generally decided that teachers will picket their own schools.
And are you willing to say to teachers who want to cross the picket lines, feel free to cross?
Well, we are telling our members that the majority voted to withdraw services, and we expect our members to abide by that. We are not threatening disciplinary action against them.
Nor mass picketing.
Well, the picketing is by people in the schools that are the people teaching in those schools, except in those areas where there are injunctions, where the picketing is taking place by non-teaching unions and others who work in those schools. In the other schools, CUPE and teachers will be picketing side by side because they work side by side in those schools.
Will you support the BC Federation Solidarity timetable of walkouts so depressingly related to me by Kube?
We have supported the Operation Solidarity. We are in this from the beginning. The statement has been one for all and all for one. We are committed to that. We are not going to sell out anybody else, and we don't expect anyone else is going to do that to us either.
Next, my thanks to Larry Kuehn. Stick around just in case. Next, I'm going to have two heavyweights, one from the Employers' Council, one from Federation of Solidarity, and phones. That's Matkin and Kube after the break. After the break.